Let's go.
But it was good. So you worked today, huh?
I did work today.
Weekend, President's Day, no holidays for you?
The Big Four does not give President's Day off. My client was off, but we weren't. So we had to do some stuff for the client tomorrow.
I guess the President's Day holiday is like a state-by-state thing, no?
No, it's a bank holiday. So my client is a bank, and they didn't have work. But I guess consulting firms don't give it off.
Right.
Because who knows? But I do get the week of July 4th off and the week of December off, so it's pretty nice. I'll take that.
And banks don't give that, so that's good.
So I'll take that. You had it off because you work for a bank, so right?
Yeah, and talking about banks, since I've been on a holiday over the last week and a half, just in vacation, not holiday, just like vacation, some time off that I took, I saw that I think last week or the week before, we officially hit the highest ever S&P 500 level, 5K. So, what was it, February 7th? How do you feel? How's your portfolio doing?
It's banging, absolutely banging. I've never been richer in my life, net worth-wise. My credit card is not looking too good, but my portfolio is doing insane. So I'm happy for that. Kind of scared because after reading so many books, that's one of the things that it teaches you, that when the market is this hot, and it's been hot for more than a year now, it's scary to think that there might be a correction coming sometime soon. And also we're buying at at the highest price that S&P has ever been. So,
right.
It's scary, but since we're long-term investors, it doesn't really matter, which we're going to talk about now.
What scares me is two things. Is what you're saying combined with the fact of when you look at like the all-time record of the S&P 500, you see that the rate that we've increased, I don't know, last 3 decades, it's so much higher than the rate that we increased probably with the previous like 70 years.
Yeah.
Or, whatever time we had before. That's one. And two is the U.S. debt, but that's like a completely other conversation that...
It's a whole other podcast.
Right. But talking about the S&P 500, I actually wanted to do this episode because we were having a conversation in the group chat the other day, and a friend of ours asked for our opinion about what to invest their IRA specifically, and you had the take of that you recently switched. I don't remember if it was your IRA or your 401k.
Both.
To be fully invested in the S&P 500, which is an interesting tactic. So break it down for me. Between the 3 portfolios that you have, which I guess are your personal, your IRA, and your 401k.
Correct.
How are those invested? In a macro way. You don't have to list it out.
So I'd say 401k is fully S&P 500. Do you want me to give the reasons why or later?
Later.
Okay, S&P 500 for the 401k. The Roth, I still have some international index funds, some REITs, but majority, like 70%, is S&P 500. And then for my personal, it's probably 60% S&P 500, and then 40% like fund stocks that I have, like Amex and Meta, and another big one is Netflix. I have those 3. I don't know why I bought them. Don't ask me. Like random.
Do you still have Shake Shack?
I do have Shake Shack and my Roth, actually. I bought it when I created my Roth, and it's doing pretty well. It's been doing pretty well lately. I used to have Jets on my Roth. I sold it to buy more S&P, but I still have some Jets on my personal brokerage. If you don't know what Jets is an ETF that tracks airline stocks. So I've been losing a lot of money for the past 3 years because the S&P has outperformed it by a lot, but still holding, seeing what happens. But to answer your question, I'd say 80% is S&P. And
then a small tangent, but when you invest in the S&P 500, what vehicles do you use, or what vehicle, use singular, do you use?
Index funds, and I normally pick the one of the company that I'm using. So for Fidelity, I buy the Fidelity S&P 500 index fund that charges 0.01% for the expense ratio. For Charles Schwab, which is my personal brokerage, I buy the Charles Schwab S&P 500 index fund.
So I guess getting to the point where I guess we wanted to discuss is You used to have your portfolio, especially in your IRA, that was like fully diversified. I think you told me that you followed the video that I did a while ago.
Yep.
That pretty much just follows what is recommended in Random Walk the Wall Street in the book. That you basically diversify between international stocks and then domestic stocks, and you don't only follow the S&P 500, but you also put like some small cap, mid cap, and large cap diversification. So what made you switch from that into being fully in the S&P 500? And just disclaimer, like bonds are not even a topic here, just because we're both 24, 25, so it's not really part of the game plan right now. So tell me.
So yeah, I was checking my S&P, my 401k investments. I made a video about this. I had it to automatically, so it automatically invested in an allocation that included bonds. And I was looking through the returns and how much each fund charged, and I noticed that the S&P 500 was outperforming, out of the 13 funds, it was outperforming 11 of them, and the expense ratio was obviously much lower. So for my 401k, I decided to definitely just go for the S&P because it was the cheapest fund and it was the third best performing fund. So I decided to put all my eggs in one basket because it's a massive basket of 500 companies, and just have the S&P in the 401k. And then for the Roth, I was using your allocation, which is, like you mentioned, the one that says that he recommends in Random Walk. But again, simplicity hands off. It's an allocation that requires rebalancing every year. And I noticed that the return wasn't as high as the S&P 500. I know that past performance is not an indicator of future performance, but I wanted, since I'm 25, I didn't mind going extremely risky and just putting all my money in the S&P 500 because, again, that's money I'm not going to touch till I'm 60, and maybe if I'm able to pass it on to my kids, not even touch those stocks. So it's just very, very risky move, but at the end of the day, the S&P itself is very diversified. It's the best 500 companies in the US, and if a company is not performing well, it's going to fall out of the index and another one's going to replace it. So I think it's a good index fund, and it's simple for me. It doesn't take real estate in my head.
So I guess it's a combination of, obviously the S&P is a good exposure, 2, simplicity,
yeah,
and 3, you like the simplicity so much that even if like you have an international stocks index that will outperform the S&P 500, you wouldn't care, because for you to have that exposure, you will have to rebalance once a year and all that stuff. Yeah. You'd rather just give that away and just be able to just invest in one fund, and that's it.
Pretty much, yeah, correct.
Yeah, right. Because I mean, when you reran the walk, which is basically the foundation for all this stuff, he says that rebalancing is just a great way to pretty much sell high and buy low.
Yeah.
But the only place that I've seen it that you can do it automatically without paying a fee, or maybe paying a small fee, is like Vanguard. And even, I mean, for me, I haven't really like looked that deep into it, and rebalancing, unless you're a nerd like myself or even you, it's probably something that people don't want to go through it. However, let's get a little technical here.
Okay.
If you've ever taken a finance class, you've heard of CAPM, which is not just cap like the usual slang. It stands for Capital Asset Pricing Model, which basically is just a graph that shows the relationship between your expected returns and your expected risk, which is measured as a standard deviation. So when you invest in either one portfolio or a combination of, in either one asset or a combination of 2 assets, you're basically going to map somewhere between the expected risk and the expected standard deviation. And obviously I'm going to put the graph here, but you basically create a line which shows the capital asset pricing model line, and you also have the efficient frontier curve. What I want to get to is, this is what you usually see when you get into a introductory finance class, to show that there's a perfect spot. There's like a really sweet spot that represents the place where you should be between 2 asset classes to kind of have the lowest amount of risk but the highest expected return. Now, you obviously give that up when you invest purely in the S&P 500, and you either land somewhere that has too much risk for little return, or pretty much a high return for a lot of risk. And you know that because you took a lot of finance classes. So what was your mindset when you remembered your days of the capital asset pricing model, and also reading it in Random Walk, when you decided to make the switch?
So Actually, he mentioned something in Random Walk that it's diversification is good up until a certain point, which is I think when you have like 60 stocks or something like that. So the S&P is already very, very diversified, and I guess I could buy something like an international index fund that has nothing to do with the S&P 500. But he also mentioned something that I found was interesting, that the world today is very global. And so when something happens that affects the domestic stock market, the United States stock market, it is very likely that it's also going to affect international stocks. So the international index funds and the domestic index funds are becoming more correlated as time passes because the world's becoming more globalized. So yes, I could secure an additional return whenever the international market performs better than the domestic market. But I think with the S&P, I'm diversified enough. And again, going back to simplicity, I don't want to be the one like picking the right allocation of international stocks and domestic stocks to maybe get a couple extra percentages with lesser risk. At the end of the day, I'm 25 years old, and hopefully after 35 years, if the United States doesn't collapse, everything is going to even out at the end. And it's obviously something I'm going to revisit when I'm 35, 40, and I start buying bonds. Maybe I'll diversify a little more to be a little more safe. But for now, simplicity is the name of the game, and I'm just chilling, like the kids say.
Well, because that was going to be my next question, is how long will you just hold the S&P 500? And I guess that's either being like, is there going to be a point where you think, here I'm going to diversify into other asset classes within equities? Sorry, here I'm going to diversify into some other like sub-asset classes? Or you're just going to hold it until you say, I'm going to diversify into other asset classes, meaning like bonds and pretty much just bonds?
I'm not going to give you like an exact age, but I think once I see that I have like a big net worth, hopefully I'll have a big net worth one day, and it's getting serious, I'll definitely I'll probably even get on a financial advisor and have him, help me diversify and create the best portfolio possible. But that's probably gonna be in my 40s, maybe, when I'm like more settled.
Right.
But for now, I don't think I have any plans, to be honest with you, anytime soon, at least.
Interesting. I mean, I'm excited because obviously the technique that you're doing, makes sense, especially over the last few years where the S&P 500 has done so good. And over the last decade or so, pretty much since the Great Recession.
Yeah.
But there's a risk.
Yeah.
But the risk of international stocks doing really well, or also small cap doing really well. Your point about globalization, I think it's really good, and it's something that we do see. But having some emerging market exposure and things like that, I think it could be good. And I guess on my side, the way that I'm invested is my Roth IRA is fully invested in that strategy that I put in that video. My brokerage is like yourself; it's fully S&P 500, and then a few individual stocks that I pick, like for example Amazon. And I think I still have Penn National Gaming.
You don't diversify in your personal brokerage?
I do NASDAQ and the S&P. That's
so only domestic stocks for the
right.
And why did you decide that way?
Since I had so much diversification in my retirement accounts, I didn't mind being a little more aggressive between the S&P and the NASDAQ. And I like having the little exposure too. The NASDAQ pretty much, because last year the S&P was 23%. I think the NASDAQ was 35, if I'm not wrong. I'll put it right here.
Okay.
So it's a little bit of an exposure that I like. It's a little mix that I like a little bit. And also there, I'm 100% with you. I want to keep it simple when it comes to my personal investments. And also give some space for individual stocks that I like. Like, for example, I like the the running shoes brand, because I think those are that's going to be doing really well because everyone's using it. So yeah, and then in my 401k, I actually have two 401k accounts. The company that I used to work for, where I had pretty much the same allocation that I had in my Roth IRA. Just different funds because it was in Vanguard and not in Fidelity. And then in the 401k that I have right now, when I got to the company, which was a little over a year ago, I did a target retirement day fund, and I never switched, and it's actually been doing pretty well. So I'm probably going to switch to something a little more aggressive and, something that I'm a little more hands-on about. But
you said
doing pretty well.
You said it hasn't been doing pretty well, or it has.
No, it has been doing pretty well.
It has.
No, it has been doing pretty well.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
'cause I mean, it's pretty similar to the allocation that I have with a Roth IRA.
Why would you switch then if it's doing well?
I guess to feel like I have a little bit more hands-on.
You want to have the hands-on.
It.
You want to.
Yeah, maybe decrease a little bit the expense ratios, even though the expense ratio is really good. But you can always play a little bit with that.
So because I feel like you're more hands-on because obviously it's what you do for a living and you do want to do covered calls at some point, right?
Yeah, with 401ks it's a little harder, and especially 401k. I mean, you probably see with your company, like switching between investments can be a little more complicated, especially since it's so automated. With a Roth IRA, it's much easier. Mm-hmm. So that's why also one of the reasons why it's kept in like a target date retirement fund, and also the 401k that I have right now doesn't offer that many funds, and they usually give some put some funds in and they take them out of the system. So that's why I kept it simple.
Fair.
So yeah. So I guess the conclusion is, you have to do something that you feel good about risk-wise. You have to have a good strategy. You can't just switch everything from one day to the other. You have to think about it like you do. And we'll see which one's better.
And we'll see. Yeah, I mean, we'll see. Hopefully the U.S. doesn't collapse. Hopefully it's still a powerhouse in 40 years. And I mean, I'm confident because I'm diversified enough. But maybe I'm missing out, and you end up beating me with the international side.
No, it's a good strategy. And now thinking about it now, since I have 2 401ks, I might switch one of the 401ks to be fully S&P. And maybe a good way, something that you could do if you're a super nerd, and I think I'm going to do this, is put all your things like your IRA, your 401k, your personal in an Excel sheet and actually see how much percentage you have like on the S&P 500. You mentioned that you think it's like 80%.
Yeah.
That way you can kind of see like a holistic portfolio.
Yeah.
That's something that we do at the office here and there.
That would be cool.
Yeah. So the only thing I'll say is comment below what you think about this, and also please let us know what you think about this format of us doing, remote videos. We love doing the podcast style episodes, so we want to hear what you think.
Yes, sir. Subscribe.
See ya.
Peace.